I had always believed that a house filled with family was a blessed house. A principle my late husband James and I built our lives on here in Atlanta. But I was about to learn that not all family shares the same definition of blessing. The warm Georgia air of that Sunday afternoon still carried the faint scent of baking chicken and collard greens. A smell that meant home to me. The last echoes of the AME church service, where I had sung my favorite hymn, "Precious Lord, Take My Hand," were still ringing in my spirit. My home, a sturdy brick house that James and I had bought when this neighborhood was just finding its strength, was quiet now. The traditional Sunday dinner was over. It was just the three of us at the big mahogany table, my only son, Marcus, his wife, Tasha, and me. That was a wonderful meal. "Mother Eleanor," Tasha said, dabbing her perfectly painted lips with one of my good cloth napkins. Tasha was always polished, always sharp, like a pretty picture in a magazine. Her nails were always done, her hair always perfect. She never looked like she'd ever had to struggle a day in her life. And I supposed, with me around, she never had to. "Thank you, child," I said, smiling. "It's a blessing to have you both here to share it." Marcus shifted in his chair. At 42, he still had the boyish look he'd never quite shed. But now it was clouded by a weakness I tried hard not to see. He worked, or rather, he consulted, which seemed to mean Tasha spent money faster than he could earn it. I looked at the empty chair at the head of the table. James' chair. "Your father, Lord rest his soul. He loved these Sundays," I said, my voice softening. "He always said this house, this business, it wasn't just for us. It was a legacy, something to show this community what we could build, brick by brick, with faith and hard work." Tasha's eyes lit up, but not at the mention of faith. "Speaking of legacy, this silver is just exquisite. Eleanor, you really must have the best of everything." I just nodded. James had good taste. "He certainly did," she said, our voice turning smooth, like honey, which is why, well, Marcus and I were talking. Here it comes. I thought, that familiar little prayer that always started with "we were talking." "Mom," Marcus chimed in, taking his cue. "You know that old car Tasha's been driving? It's just not reliable. It's embarrassing. Really, it keeps making this noise." "Unwise?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "It's terrible," Tasha said, placing a delicate hand on Marcus's arm. "And honestly, Eleanor, with the kind of image we have to maintain, pulling up in that old thing, it just doesn't look right. People talk." I looked at my son. James had built a business with his bare hands, covered in grease and sawdust. He never once worried about his image. But I held my tongue. This was my son, my only child, and Tasha was his wife. He sighed, a quiet breath that only God and I could hear. "And what did you have in mind?" Tasha's smile brightened. "All business. There's a beautiful new sedan, a luxury model. It's safe, reliable. It would be an investment." "Really? For the family's reputation? An investment?" I'd heard that word before. I heard it when they needed a down payment for their high-rise apartment. I heard it when Tasha decided she needed a new wardrobe for her charity functions. My husband's legacy was becoming their monthly allowance. But what is a mother to do? You pray for your children. You raise them in the church. And you help them when they fall. Or, in Marcus's case, when they are pushed. "All right," I said, pushing my chair back. The wood scraped softly against the floor. "I will help you." Again, I went into James' study, the room still smelling faintly of his Old Spice and the leather-bound books he loved. I sat at his heavy desk and pulled out the checkbook. The Times Vance Family Times checkbook. It felt heavier than usual. My hand, wrinkled with age, but still steady, wrote out the numbers Tasha had mentioned. It was an amount that made my stomach tighten. But I signed my name, Eleanor Vance, on the line. I walked back into the dining room and handed the folded check to Tasha. Not to Marcus. We both knew who was in charge. Her smile was dazzling. But it never, ever reached her eyes. "You're a lifesaver, Eleanor," she said, slipping the check neatly into her designer handbag. "We just don't know what we'd do without you." The words hung in the air, feeling less like gratitude and more like a cold, hard fact. That night, the house was silent. The smell of greens and chicken was long gone, replaced by the quiet scent of old wood and lemon oil. I was alone in my study, the way I was most nights. I looked at the big, framed photo of James on the desk. He was smiling, his eyes so full of life and pride. "Oh, James," I whispered to the empty room. "Am I doing the right thing by that boy? Did I make him too soft?" The check I had written sat heavy on my spirit. It wasn't the money. James and I had been blessed. It was the times feeling asterisk, the cold, empty feeling Tasha's smile gave me, on a whim, moved by something I couldn't name. I opened the bottom drawer of the desk. I pulled out the thick bank statement from last month, the one I usually just glanced at. My eyes scanned the lines. But this time, I didn't just look at the ending balance. I got my reading glasses from the side table and ran my finger down the column of withdrawals. Check. Check. Wire transfer. Check. My breath caught in my throat. I had seen the individual amounts before, but I had never truly added them up. Not month after month. I sat back in James's chair, the leather groaning under my slight weight. The total I had given them in the last year alone was staggering. It was more than the down payment on this very house. It wasn't help. It wasn't blessing them. It was a flood. And I was the one opening the dam, letting my husband's legacy drain away, all while staring at his picture and praying for wisdom. The check I wrote today wasn't a lifesaver. It was just one more payment to a snake I had welcomed to my own Sunday table. It's one thing to feel a cold knot of unease in your stomach. It's another entirely to have that knot tighten into pure ice by the venomous words of your own family, spoken when they think you can't hear. Sleep would not come to me that night. The numbers from that bank statement were burned into the back of my eyelids. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the totals, the endless stream of withdrawals, the grand old clock in the downstairs hall, a sound that had comforted me for 40 years, now seemed to mock me, ticking away the seconds. Each one a dollar bill. Asterisk. 1, 2, 1, 2. The house felt stuffy, suffocating. I pushed back the covers. I needed a glass of water. I needed to feel the cold tile of the kitchen floor under my feet. Something to remind me I was grounded, that I was not just imagining this sickness in my heart. I slipped on my old satin robe and padded softly out of my room. The upstairs hallway was dark, illuminated only by a small nightlight near the stairs. The house was silent. God forgive me for my lack of charity. But I was praying Tasha and Marcus would decide to leave in the morning, to go back to their own apartment that I was paying for. I passed the guest room, the room that had been Marcus's since he was a boy. The door was cracked open, just a sliver, spilling a thin line of yellow light into the hall, and I heard Tasha's voice. It was not the sweet, honey-coated voice she used at dinner. This voice was sharp, cold, and stripped of all pretense. It was like a shard of glass. "I don't care what he times thinks asterisk," she snapped, clearly on the phone. "He'll do what I say. He always does." A pause. I froze, my hand flat against the floral wallpaper, my body hidden in the shadow of the hall. "Look, I'm telling you," Tasha continued, her voice low and urgent. "As soon as we get control, we are selling this old house. The location is prime. We can get millions for this land." My blood ran cold. Asterisk. Sell this house? Asterisk James's house? The old woman won't even know what hit her, Tasha said. And she times laughed asterisk. A short, ugly sound. Listen to me. The lawyer said it's simple. We just need to file the paperwork for a conservatorship. It's easy. I couldn't feel my feet on the floor. My hand went to my mouth, pressing hard against my lips. Asterisk conservatorship? Asterisk. You just have to back me up. Tasha ordered the person on the phone. We'll tell everyone. All those old biddies at the church. How confused she's been. How forgetful she is. She's old. It's expected. We'll start by taking her to that specialist. The one I found. The one who knows how to write a report? Once I have power of attorney, it's done. I'll have him declare her incompetent within 6 months. I was paralyzed. The words hitting me like physical blows. Asterisk, incompetent. Asterisk, asterisk, forgetful. Asterisk, this wasn't just about money. This wasn't just greed. This was an execution. They were planning to steal my home, my legacy, and my very times mind asterisk. And then I heard his voice, muffled, but clear. My son, Marcus. He wasn't on the phone. He was in the room with her. All right, Tasha. All right, he said, his voice weak and tired. Whatever you say, just keep it down. Okay, she might hear you. Asterisk. Whatever you say. He didn't defend me. He didn't tell her she was crazy. He didn't tell her that's my mother. He just told her to be quiet while she plotted my destruction. The betrayal was so total, so absolute, that I thought I might faint right there in the hallway. I stumbled backward, my hand still pressed to my mouth to stifle the sob that was tearing its way up from my soul. I don't remember walking back to my bedroom. I don't remember shutting the door. I found myself gripping the carved post of my bed, my knuckles white, my whole body shaking as if I had a fever. They weren't just taking my money. They were taking my life. They were planning to paint me as a confused old woman, lock me away from my friends, my church, and everything James and I had built. All so Tasha could sell my home and buy more designer shoes. And my son was holding the door for her. I sat on the edge of my bed. I didn't cry. The shock was too deep for tears. I just sat there, in the dark. As the grandfather clock downstairs continued to tick away the seconds, I watched the blackness of the window turn to a deep, bruised gray. And then, finally, to the first pale, sickly light of dawn, the trust I'd spent a lifetime building, the love I had poured into my only child. It was all just ash. They thought I was forgetful. They thought I was incompetent. I took a deep, shuddering breath and stood up. I walked to my vanity and looked at the old woman in the mirror. Her eyes were red, but they were not confused. They were on fire. All right, I whispered to my reflection. I will have to show them just how competent a child of God and the wife of James Vance can truly be. When your own blood turns against you, you quickly discover that true family sometimes comes from the seeds of friendship your ancestors planted long ago. The next morning, I came downstairs and found Tasha and Marcus in my kitchen, drinking times, my times, coffee from times my times, good china, as if it were any other day, as if they had not stood in the dark and plotted to strip me of my home and my dignity. My hand did not shake as I poured my own cup. My voice did not tremble when I smiled. Good morning, children. Tasha looked up, her eyes narrowing just a fraction. You're looking a little peaked this morning. Eleanor, are you feeling all right? You didn't sleep well? The nerve of that woman, asking me if I slept well. I am just a bit under the weather. Child, I said, stirring sugar into my cup. I think I'll skip my Sisters of Grace meeting at the church today. I'm just going to rest. It was the first strategic lie I had told in my adult life. And the Lord forgive me. But it came as easy as breathing. I needed them out of my house. I needed to be alone to make my first move. Oh, you poor thing, Tasha said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. You see, Marcus? I told you she's been overdoing it. You should rest. Eleanor, rest a lot. It was a command, not a suggestion. She was already planting the seeds. We have some errands to run. Anyway, Tasha said, standing and smoothing her expensive slacks, that check you gave us? It's going to good use. I watched them pull out of my driveway in their luxury car. A car times I times paid for. The moment their car turned the corner, I was at the telephone in James's study. I didn't call my pastor. Pastor Henderson. Not yet. I didn't call my friends. Like Ms. Hattie from the church. Tasha's words, "Tell everyone at the church?" echoed in my head. She might have already started poisoning that well. And I didn't know who to trust, so I called the one person I knew was sharp, young, and completely outside Tasha's glittering, venomous circle. I dialed the number for a downtown law firm and asked for the paralegal desk, Imani Davis. Please. Imani's grandmother, Ruth, had been my dearest friend in this world. We had raised our children together, prayed together, and buried our husbands together. Ruth, Lord rest her soul, always used to say, "My Imani is sharper than a tack. Eleanor, she's going to be a lawyer. Mark my words." Well, she was a paralegal. And right now, a smart paralegal was exactly what God had provided. Auntie Eleanor? Imani's voice came on the line, bright and professional, but with that familiar warmth. Is everything okay? Imani. Child. I am fine. Honey. Fine. I said, my voice low, but I have a business matter I need to discuss. It is a private family matter. Can you meet me? Somewhere quiet. And please, I don't mention this to anyone. The line was silent for a beat. Of course, Auntie, she said. All business. The little cafe on Auburn Avenue. Near my office? In half an hour? We met in a quiet booth in the back of the cafe, the air smelling of roasted coffee and sweet bread. It was far from my neighborhood, far from the prying eyes of my church community. Imani slid into the booth. All smart suits and bright, intelligent eyes. She looked so much like Ruth. Auntie Eleanor, it is so good to see you, she said, her smile genuine, but her smile faded as she looked at my face. What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse. Child, I said, laying my hands flat on the table. I'm here because your grandmother Ruth was my best friend. I'm here because I trust her blood. And I trust you. And I need legal advice. I told her everything. The bank statement that showed the bleeding, the Sunday dinner. And then, I told her about the hallway. I told her the exact words I heard Tasha say. At first, Imani was just as I knew she'd be. Shocked. Disbelieving. Auntie. No, she said, shaking her head. Marcus loves you. I know he does. And Tasha. I mean, everyone knows Tasha is a lot. But this? Steal your house? Declare you incompetent? That's evil. I leaned in, my voice just a whisper. She used these words. Imani, file the paperwork. Conservatorship? Get control. She's forgetful. I watched Imani's face. The friendly concern, the neighborhood girl who called me Auntie. She vanished. In her place sat Ms. Davis, the paralegal. Her eyes narrowed, her back stiffened. She understood. She knew this wasn't just family drama. This was legal warfare. Conservatorship. She repeated, the word tasting like poison in her mouth. She pulled her tablet from her briefcase. Her fingers flew across the screen. After a moment, she turned the tablet to face me. This is good, she said, pointing to the screen. You're right to be worried, Auntie. But here's the public property record for your house. It's still in your name. And your name alone. They can't sell it. Asterisk, yet asterisk. She looked up from the screen. her gaze so sharp, it could have cut stone. But if they declare you incompetent, if they get a judge to grant that conservatorship, they can petition the court for control of times everything asterisk. Your house, your bank accounts, even your medical decisions. And they've already started. That forgetful narrative? That's step one. Imani's tone hardened. They are building a case. Ms. Eleanor, so we have to build a better one. We have to act first. We need evidence. A strange calm settled over me. The shaking in my hands had stopped. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, clear purpose. The Lord hadn't abandoned me. He had just sent me a warrior. What kind of evidence? Imani? She leaned in, her voice precise. First, we are going to install discreet, motion-activated security cameras in the public areas of your house, the living room, the kitchen, the hallways. Today. Second, you are going to see a neurologist. One times, we times choose. Not one Tasha finds, for a full, independent, cognitive, and neurological assessment. And third, she tapped the bank statement I'd brought, which was folded in my purse. We audit. We audit times everything asterisk. The first time you say no to family that has only ever heard yes, you're not just closing a wallet. You're bracing for the war that no will inevitably start. Imani worked faster than a hummingbird. That very afternoon, while Tasha and Marcus were out, celebrating the check I'd given them, no doubt, a security consultant arrived. He was a sharp young man, Imani's cousin, she'd said with a wink. He was polite and efficient, just installing a few upgrades. Ms. Vance, he said loudly, for the benefit of any listening ears. To monitor the main exits, he installed 2 cameras, so small I could barely see them. One was nestled between my late husband's copy of Times The Souls of Black Folk Times and an old family photo on the living room mantel. The other was in the kitchen, high on the wall, angled perfectly to see the back door and the small table where the mail was always left. The next morning, I did the hardest part. I put on my Sunday hat, even though it was a Tuesday, because it made me feel strong. I walked into the downtown branch of my bank, the bank James and I had used to build our business for 40 years. I sat down with the manager, a nice young man named Mr. Peters. Good morning, Ms. Vance, he said, smiling. What can we do for you? I took a deep breath and followed Imani's script to the letter. Mr. Peters, I said, my voice steady. I am reorganizing my finances. Just getting my house in order. As the good Lord instructs. That's very wise, he said. First, I said, I need to freeze the joint credit card I share with my son, Marcus Vance, effective immediately. And I need to cancel his access to my primary checking account. Mr. Peters' smile faltered. Oh, is everything all right? Ms. Vance, has there been a security breach? I gave him a sad, grandmotherly smile. You could say that, child, but it's a family matter. I'm just simplifying things. Of course, he said, typing. And second? Second, I have this new trust document, I said, sliding the papers Imani's boss had prepared across the desk. I need to move the majority of my liquid assets from my checking and savings into this new trust account. Immediately. Now he looked truly concerned. But he was a professional. I see. The Eleanor Vance Legacy Trust. I'll get this processed right away. Ms. Vance. When I walked out of that bank, the Atlanta sun felt a little warmer. I had taken back the keys to my own kingdom. I went home, sat in my high-backed armchair in the living room, and I waited. I sat directly across from the mantel, knowing that little electronic eye was open and watching. It was my silent witness. I didn't have to wait long. Around 3 o'clock, I heard the front door open. I heard the sound of expensive shopping bags being dropped. A thud on my hardwood floors. Tasha stormed into the living room, Marcus trailing behind her like a lost puppy. Her face was a mask of polite confusion, but her eyes were two chips of ice. "Eleanor," she said, her voice dangerously sweet, like sugar poured over arsenic. "There must be some kind of mistake at the bank. A terrible, embarrassing mistake." I looked up from the Bible I was pretending to read, my finger marking my place in Psalms. "Oh, what kind of mistake?" "Tasha, my card," she said, pulling it from her wallet. It was times declined asterisk. At Neiman's breasting, in front of everyone. Can you imagine how humiliating that was? "You need to call them right now and fix this." I carefully closed my Bible and set it down in my lap. "There's no mistake." "Tasha," she stared at me. The sweet smile froze. Then it cracked. "What? What did you say?" I said. "There is no mistake," I repeated. My voice was calm and clear, the way it was when I used to teach Sunday school. Patient, but firm. "I was at the bank this morning. I am reorganizing my finances. That credit card and the joint account it was tied to are now closed." Tasha's mask didn't just slip. It shattered. Her face, usually so perfectly composed, twisted into something ugly and raw. "What do you mean?" "Asterisk, closed asterisk?" she shrieked, her voice losing all its polish. "You can't do that. You can't just times that. We rely on that. That's our money, Marcus. Tell your mother. Tell her she can't do this to us." Marcus, bless his weak heart, stumbled forward, wringing his hands. Mom, please, you don't understand. Tasha needs that for house expenses. You know, groceries, things for the house. Asterisk, groceries asterisk. Lying to my face about groceries. To protect the woman who called me an old, incompetent woman, I looked at my son, my only child, the last bit of softness in my heart, the part that always made excuses for him. It hardened into steel. "This is my times house. Marcus," I said, my voice low and final. "And those are my times expenses. From now on, I will handle them myself. As for your house expenses, the bank of Mom is closed. Permanently." Marcus looked like I had slapped him. He actually recoiled. But Tasha just stared. The look she gave me wasn't just anger. It was pure, unadulterated venom. She said nothing else. She just breathed, long and heavy. Through her nose, I could practically see the wheels turning in her head, calculating, recalculating. Her mind, moving on to the next, darker part of her plan. I knew, right then, that she had just moved on to Plan B. And I knew, as I sat there in my armchair, that my little camera on the mantel had captured every single second of it. When they can't get to your money, they try to get to your name. They forget that in our community, a good name is a legacy that money can't buy and lies can't easily destroy. The war didn't start with shouting. It started with silence. A cold, heavy silence from the very people who had been my bedrock for my entire adult life. A few days after our confrontation over the credit cards, the air in the house was thick with an unspoken truce. Tasha and Marcus were polite, but cold. They were staying in my house, eating my food, and plotting. I knew it, and they knew I knew it. We were like two armies, staring at each other across a battlefield. But the first shot didn't come from inside the house. It came from the street. I was sitting on my front porch, rocking in the chair James had bought me, trying to feel the afternoon sun on my face. I was trying to pray, to find a moment of peace. That's when I saw Ms. Hattie walking down the sidewalk. Ms. Hattie, my prayer partner for 20 years, the woman who held my hand at James's funeral, the one who sat with me in the hospital when Marcus had his appendix out. She was my sister in Christ. "Hattie," I called out, raising my hand to wave. my heart lifting at the sight of a friendly face. She saw me. I times no times. She saw me. His step faltered. She froze for just a second. There on the sidewalk. Not 20 feet away. Then, as if she'd been stung, she put her head down, clutched her purse tight to her chest, and crossed the street. She walked right past my house. On the other side, her pace quickening, she gave a little, curt wave, not even looking at me, and hurried on down the block. I lowered my hand. The sting of it was sharper and more painful than any slap. Ms. Hattie? Of all people? I went inside, my hands trembling. Tasha had been busy. She was poisoning the well, just as she'd planned. She was whispering in the ears of my friends, turning my sisters of grace against me. I was being isolated, painted as the poor, confused, forgetful old woman. My phone rang in the study, and I jumped. I hurried to pick it up, praying it wasn't another friend calling to make an excuse. Auntie Eleanor? It was Imani. Her voice was crisp. All business. I've reviewed the first 48 hours of the camera footage. You were right. You were absolutely right. What did you see? Child? I asked, sitting down hard in James's chair. It's just what you feared, she said, her voice tight with anger. I watched Tasha go to the mailbox both yesterday and this morning. She brought the mail in, sorted through it on the kitchen counter, right under the kitchen camera, and she pulled out 2 envelopes. They looked like bills. One had the blue logo of the city water department, and the other was from the power company. I closed my eyes. What did she do with them? Imani? She. Ms. Eleanor. She put them in her handbag. She hid them. She's intercepting your mail. She's times creating times the forgetful narrative. Just like we thought. She's going to let your power get shut off. Then she'll run around telling everyone, you forgot to pay. So that's how it was done. It was so simple. So wicked. She wasn't just lying times about times me. She was actively Laranite, physically creating the evidence for her lies. Before I could even absorb this, my other line beeped. Imani. Hold on. Child. I clicked over. Eleanor Vance speaking. Eleanor? The voice was deep and familiar, but it was heavy. Heavier than I'd ever heard it. It's Pastor Henderson. My heart stopped. I'm here. Pastor. Eleanor. I just had a visit. A very concerning visit. Here it is. I thought. The second shot. It was from your son, Marcus, and his wife, Tasha, he said, his voice full of pastoral concern. They came to me. As their pastor, they're very, very worried about you. Eleanor. Worried. I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Yes, they said. Well, they said, you've been having some trouble. Forgetting things. Missing payments. Eleanor. They showed me a past due notice for your power bill. They're afraid you're not safe living by yourself. They are deeply concerned about your time's well-being asterisk. The hypocrisy of it. The cold, calculated, snake-like evil of it all. They steal my bills, then run to my pastor with past due notices to prove I'm incompetent. They were trying to take my church from me. My spiritual home. The last sanctuary I had. I gripped the phone. My knuckles white. My voice trembled. Not with fear, but with a holy, righteous anger. Pastor Henderson, I said, my voice suddenly as clear as a bell. I thank you for your concern. It does my heart good to know you care. I took a breath, but I need you to listen to me very carefully. They are not worried. They are times lying asterisk. They are not concerned. They are times plotting asterisk. I let that sink in. I need you to trust me. Pastor, I need you to trust Eleanor Vance, the woman you have known for 30 years, the woman who helped build the new Sunday school wing with her own hands, more than you trust them. The line was silent. I could hear the big grandfather clock ticking in his office. A heavy, measured sound. I held my breath, my entire spirit hanging in that silence. "Eleanor," Pastor Henderson said finally, and his voice had changed. The pastoral concern was gone, replaced by something grave, something serious. "Can you come to my office tomorrow? 10 o'clock sharp." "I'll be there," I whispered. "Good," he said. "And perhaps it's time we reviewed your dear James's will together. There's a particular clause in it I believe has suddenly become very relevant. There comes a moment when the polite masks of family fall away completely, and the gentle requests for help turn into the cold, hard demands of an enemy." I walked back from the AME church that afternoon, but I did not feel like a woman who had just left a house of prayer. I felt like a general who had just been handed a secret battle plan. My meeting with Pastor Henderson had been illuminating. I had sat in his quiet study, the one with the tall books and the portrait of Dr. King, and I had listened. He had opened a safe, and from it, he had taken my James's will, and he showed me the clause, the legacy foresight clause, as he called it. My wise, quiet, steady James. He had seen a weakness in our son, a shadow in the world that I, in my motherly love, had refused to see. Long before Tasha ever entered our lives, James had planted a seed of protection, a failsafe, deep in the legal pages of his will, a clause that lay sleeping, waiting for exactly this kind of treachery. Pastor Henderson had clasped my hand, his own large and warm second. "James loved you, Eleanor," he said, his voice grave, "and he protected his legacy. He protected you. Now, let's let the Lord's justice and your husband's wisdom do their work." I came home not as a victim, but as a woman armed. I was emboldened. I was prepared. I was ready. That evening, they came for me. I wasn't in my rocking chair. I wasn't in the kitchen. I was in James's study, sitting at his heavy mahogany desk, a place I had avoided for too long. I was paying the very bills Tasha had stolen and hidden. Imani, God bless her, had snuck into Tasha's room while they were out and retrieved them from her handbag. They didn't knock. They just walked in. Tasha first, Marcus trailing her, a shadow in his own home. The atmosphere in the room, which had just begun to feel like times mine times again, turned to ice. Tasha was holding a thick, formal-looking envelope, her surface-level sweetness, the honey-coated voice she used for Sunday dinners, was gone. She was all sharp edges and cold impatience now. "Eleanor, we're done playing these games," she said. Her voice was flat. "All business. We know you're struggling. It's obvious. We did what we had to do. We spoke to Pastor Henderson." "Oh, you think times you did. Child, you think you told him your story? You have no idea what he told, times me asterisk. He understands our concern." Tasha went on, her arrogance astounding. "Frankly, asterisk, everyone times does. We think it's best for everyone to avoid any more confusion. If you just sign this power of attorney." She slid the envelope across the polished wood. It stopped right in front of me, looking like a rattlesnake coiled on my desk blotter. "It's all prepared," she said. "It just gives us the legal authority to help you manage things, pay your bills on time, handle the estate. It's what's best for you." I looked at the envelope. Then I looked at Tasha's hard, greedy eyes. Then I looked at my son. My son. He was standing by the bookshelf, unable to meet my gaze, staring at a spot on the carpet, a coward in his own father's study. I didn't touch the envelope. I didn't even open it. With one finger, I calmly pushed it back across the desk, back toward her. "I will not." The words were quiet, but they landed in the silent room like a cannon shot. Marcus flinched. Tasha's face, the one she'd worked so hard to keep smooth with my money, contorted with a rage so pure, it was terrifying. It was sudden and violent. You times will asterisk, she hissed, slamming her hand flat on James's desk, making his penholder rattle. You foolish, stubborn old woman. You think you have a choice? She snatched the envelope and waved it in the air. If you don't sign this, we are filing for an emergency conservatorship. We have plenty times of proof that you're incompetent. We have the unpaid bills. We have testimony from your friends at the church who are all so worried about you. The hearing is already scheduled. You will be declared incompetent. And we will get control anyway. This is just the easy way. She was threatening me. In my own home. At my husband's desk. The disrespect. The unholy audacity of it. A strength I didn't know I possessed rose up in me. It was the strength of James. It was the strength of my ancestors who had survived so much more than this. It was the strength of every prayer I had ever prayed. I stood up. I was shorter than Tasha. She, in her high-dollar heels. But in that moment, I towered over her. Then I will see you in court, I said. My voice was quiet, but it was the quiet of a coming storm. Both of you. I pointed to the door of the study. Get out. Tasha's mouth fell open, shocked at being spoken to this way. You can't, I said. Asterisk. Get out, asterisk. I repeated, my voice rising, filled with the authority of this house and the name I carried. Get out of my study. Get out of my house. Now, I had spent 40 years sitting in the front pew of my church, listening to sermons about judgment. But this was the first time I truly understood what it felt like to be put on trial by my own blood. The courtroom was nothing like my church. It was cold, sterile, and smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. The wood was pale, not the rich, dark mahogany of James's study. And it felt temporary, like a stage set for a terrible play. I sat at a long, scarred table, wearing my best navy blue suit. It was the suit I had worn to the mayor's prayer breakfast, the suit I saved for occasions of respect. I never, in all my days, imagined I would wear it to a place like this, to defend my own mind. Beside me sat Imani, no longer just my auntie's granddaughter, but a fierce professional in a sharp gray suit. She wasn't acting as my lawyer, but she sat right behind him, whispering, passing notes, a lioness guarding her cub. Milavier. Mr. Graves, the senior partner from her firm, was a tall, stern-looking man who reminded me of an Old Testament prophet. He had a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. I glanced over my shoulder. Just once. The gallery was filled. My community. My people. Pastor Henderson was there, his hands steepled under his chin, his face unreadable. And Ms. Hattie, my prayer partner. She was there, twisting a handkerchief in her hands, her face pale and confused. They were all there, drawn in by Tasha's insidious web of whispers, all of them looking at me with that same terrible, worried expression. They were all wondering if it was true. Asterisk. Was poor dear Eleanor Vance finally losing her mind? Asterisk. The judge, a woman with tired, intelligent eyes, called the case. In the matter of the conservatorship of Eleanor Vance, hearing my name spoken in this place, like I was a child or a criminal, felt like a sacrilege. Tasha and Marcus's lawyer, a slick man with a shiny suit and a voice that was too smooth, stood up. Your Honor, we are here today for a tragic, but necessary, reason, he began. We are here, with the heaviest of hearts, to protect a beloved matriarch from herself. He called his first witness. We call Tasha Vance to the stand. Tasha walked to the stand, the picture of sorrowful duty. She wore a simple, modest dress in a dove-gray color. No flash, no designer labels today. She looked like a dutiful, heartbroken daughter-in-law. She placed her hand on the Holy Bible, and I felt a bolt of anger so hot I thought I might faint. To see her, lay her lying hand on the Lord's word. I love my mother-in-law, Tasha began, her voice trembling just beautifully. She dabbed a tissue at her perfectly dry eyes. Marcus and I, this is the hardest thing we have ever had to do. But she is a danger to herself. The lawyer led her gently. How so? Mrs. Vance? She forgets everything. Tasha whispered, as if the admission pained her. She forgets to eat. She forgets her appointments. She's not paying her bills. Her voice broke. A flawless performance. The power was almost shut off. We try to help her. But she's become so paranoid. She threw us out of the house. She thinks we're trying to steal from her. She looked at the judge, her eyes wide and glistening with manufactured tears. We're just so times worried, asterisk. It was masterful. She was painting a perfect picture of a loving family struggling with a difficult senile elder. The slick lawyer nodded sadly. Your Honor, we submit Exhibit A, a copy of a past due notice from the Atlanta Power Company. Exhibit B, a past due notice from the Water Department. We have half a dozen more, all unpaid, all from the last month. He submitted the stack of evidence. The very bills she had stolen from my mailbox. And, he continued, we submit Exhibit C, an affidavit from a close personal friend of Ms. Vance's, Ms. Hattie Dubois. I heard a small gasp from the gallery. I turned. Ms. Hattie's head had whipped up, her eyes wide with shock, her mouth open. She looked horrified. She was realizing, right there, in that courtroom, that her worried words to Tasha over the phone, "Oh, I'm just so worried about Eleanor. She seems so distant lately," had been twisted, put on paper, and signed by a notary. They had turned her concern into a legal weapon. Then, the lawyer said, "We call Marcus Vance." My heart hammered against my ribs. My son, my boy. He walked to the stand. His shoulders slumped. He looked shabby. He wouldn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the floor, on his hands, on the judge, anywhere but at me. "Mr. Vance," said the lawyer, "do you love your mother?" "Yes, sire," Marcus mumbled. "And in your opinion, based on your daily observations, is your mother capable of managing her own affairs? Her finances? Her health?" This was it. The moment. The breaking of the fifth commandment. Asterisk. Honor thy father and thy mother. He stared at his hands in his lap. The silence in the courtroom was a living thing. "No, sire," he said, his voice so quiet, the judge had to ask him to speak up. "No, sire," he repeated, louder. She's confused. She gets angry for no reason. She needs help. We just want to protect her." He lied. My son, with his hand on the Holy Bible, lied to a judge to strip me of my home, my rights, and my life, all for a woman who despised me, and a life he was too weak to earn for himself. I didn't cry. I didn't sob. I felt a coldness I had never known, a piece of my heart, the part that was reserved only for him. It turned to stone. The slick lawyer stood and faced the judge. "Your Honor," he said, his voice dripping with false pity. "As you can see, the testimony is clear. The evidence is clear. Ms. Vance is sadly no longer capable of managing her own affairs. Her loving son and daughter-in-law are asking the court to step in. We must protect her from herself." The judge looked at the evidence. She looked at Tasha, who was weeping softly into her tissue. She looked at Marcus, who looked broken. And then she looked at me. She wasn't a monster. She was a woman. And she looked at me with genuine, profound pity. It was the exact look Tasha had worked so hard, and so wickedly, to create. "Well, Counselor Graves," the judge said, turning to my lawyer, "this seems quite straightforward and very unfortunate. What do you have to say to this? Mr. Graves stood, gathering his papers. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I did not look at my son. I did not look at Tasha. I looked straight at Imani. I gave her one slow, deliberate nod. It was time. They say the truth shall set you free. But they never tell you what happens when that truth comes in the form of a high-definition video recording played in a silent courtroom. Mr. Graves stood, his tall, imposing frame drawing every eye in the room. That look of pity on the judge's face had not gone unnoticed by him. Your Honor. His voice boomed, deep and steady, filling the cold room with an authority that had been missing. The petitioners have painted a very creative picture of my client. A picture of a confused, paranoid, and incompetent woman. We would now like to offer a different picture, one based not on tearful hearsay, but on objective, medical fact. He produced a thick, bound report from his briefcase and handed it to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. This, Your Honor, he said, is a full cognitive and neurological assessment of Ms. Eleanor Vance, conducted last week by Dr. Alistair Cole, the Chief of Neurology at Emory University Hospital. I will not bore the court by reading the entire 30-page report. I will simply read the conclusion. He put on his reading glasses. A small, dramatic gesture. Dr. Cole concludes, Ms. Vance's cognitive function is not just sound. It is exceptional times for her age. Her memory recall is in the 98th percentile. She exhibits foresight, complex reasoning, and a lucid understanding of her financial and personal affairs. There is zero medical, neurological, or psychiatric basis for a conservatorship. The judge's eyebrows shot up. She took the report and began to read it herself, her expression shifting instantly from pity to sharp, focused interest. Now, Mr. Graves continued, his voice taking on a sharp, sarcastic edge. Regarding these unpaid bills and Miss Tackett, Vance's supposed forgetfulness, he turned his head and, for just a second, looked directly at Tasha. The petitioners claim Ms. Vance is dangerously absent-minded. We would argue she is, in fact, the victim of a malicious and predatory campaign to manufacture that very evidence. Tasha's lawyer jumped to his feet. Objection. Your Honor, that is baseless. Inflammatory speculation. Mr. Graves didn't even look at him. Is it, Your Honor, or is it a fact? We have video evidence from inside Ms. Vance's home. You could have heard a pin drop. The entire gallery leaned forward as one. Tasha, who had been looking smug, suddenly froze. Ms. Imani Davis. Mr. Graves said, Please play the first file. Imani, her face calm and set, clicked a key on her laptop. The large monitors in the courtroom, the ones that had been dark, flickered to life. The image was my kitchen counter, the back door. The camera angle was high, the picture clear as day. The timestamp in the corner read 2 days after I had closed the bank accounts. We all watched as Tasha walked in, carrying the mail. We watched her sort it on the counter. We watched her glance over her shoulder, toward the study. Then, plain as day, take the white envelope from the Atlanta Power Company and the blue one from the Water Department. We watched her, clear as a bell, slip them both deep into her designer handbag. A great, collective gasp times, rose from the gallery. I heard Ms. Hattie cry out, Oh, Lord Jesus, have mercy. I looked at Tasha. Her face, the color had drained from it. She looked like she had been turned to stone. Her eyes were wide and fixed on the screen, her mouth half open in a silent O of pure, unadulterated shock. Imani clicked again. The scene changed. My living room, the mantel, We saw Tasha and Marcus standing where they had stood just days before. We heard Tasha's voice, captured perfectly by the small microphone. Asterisk, we are filing for an emergency conservatorship. We have plenty of proof that you're incompetent. Asterisk. Marcus, sitting next to her at the petitioner's table, looked like he was going to be physically sick. He sank down in his chair, his skin a pasty gray, and put his head in his hands. Mr. Graves let the silence hang for a long steeze. Heavy moment. Your Honor, he said quietly, the petitioner's case is built entirely on fraud. But there is one final matter. He looked to the gallery. We call Pastor Henderson to the stand. My pastor walked to the stand, his face a mask of sorrowful, righteous duty. He took the oath. Pastor, Mr. Graves said, you are the executor of the last will and testament of the late James Vance. Correct? I am, Pastor Henderson said, his voice deep and strong. And did Mr. Ree too? Vance's will contain a specific clause, a legacy foresight clause, to be enacted under very specific circumstances? It did, the pastor confirmed. And what? Mr. Graves asked. Are those circumstances? Mr. Vance stipulated, the pastor said, his voice resonating with my husband's wisdom, that this clause was to be read aloud in a court of law only times in the event that an action was brought by his son Marcus to have his wife, Eleanor Vance, declared legally incompetent. The courtroom was spinning. Tasha's head, which had been lowered in defeat, snapped up. She had no idea. Marcus looked up from his hands, his face pale with a new, dawning, sickening horror. Please read the clause. Pastor, Mr. Graves said. Pastor Henderson put on his reading glasses. He unfolded the document. His voice was like thunder. In the event, he read, that my wife, Eleanor Vance, is ever found by a court of law to be incompetent as a result of a legal action brought by my son, Marcus Vance. It is my final will and testament that 100% of the Vance estate, including all properties, businesses, and liquid assets, is to be immediately liquidated. He paused. Tasha was shaking her head, as if to ward off the words. This total sum, the pastor continued, his voice unwavering, shall be placed in a charitable trust, to be managed by the AME Church, for the sole purpose of community scholarships and development in our beloved Atlanta. He took a final, deep breath, and delivered my James's final, loving blow. My son, Marcus, for his part in this betrayal of his mother, shall receive the sum of $1. The silence in that courtroom was so total, so absolute. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Tasha let out a sound. It was not a word. It was not a cry. It was a choked, strangled, animal gasp of pure, horrified rage. She had not only lost the case, she had not only been exposed as a liar and a thief, she had just publicly revealed to the entire world that she had plotted, schemed, and destroyed her husband, all to chase an inheritance that, by her very own actions, she had just set on fire. When the gavel finally falls, it's not just a sound, it's the closing of one door, the bolting of another, and the first ray of light coming through a window you thought was sealed shut. The judge looked down from her bench. The pity in her eyes was gone, replaced by a cold, hard fire I had not seen before. She was not looking at me. She was looking directly at Tasha and Marcus, who were frozen in their seats. I have been on this bench for 15 years, the judge said, her voice shaking with a controlled, righteous fury, and in all my time, I have never seen such a clear, disgusting, and predatory attempt to commit what amounts to elder abuse and fraud under the color of law. Tasha's lawyer tried to stand. Your Honor, we Sit times down asterisk. Counselor. The judge snapped. And he fell back into his chair as if he'd been struck. You? She said, pointing a finger directly at Tasha. Preyed on the very community systems meant to protect elders like your mother-in-law. You intercepted her mail. You manufactured false evidence. You lied to her friends. You suborned perjury from your own husband. You lied under oath. You did all of this. And her voice dripped with contempt. In a greedy, despicable attempt to steal her assets. She then turned to my son. Marcus wouldn't look up. He was staring at his hands, which were shaking. And you, Mr. Vance, she said, her voice full of a different kind of anger. Disappointment. You dishonored your father's legacy and betrayed your mother's trust. You are a disgrace to her, and you are a disgrace to this court. The judge looked at the papers in front of her. This petition is not just dismissed. It is dismissed times with prejudice asterisk, meaning you can times never times bring such an action against your mother again. You are fortunate. Mrs. Vance. Mr. Vance. That Ms. Vance is not pressing criminal charges for fraud, mail theft, and perjury. I am ordering you to pay all of Ms. Vance's legal fees. Now, get out of my courtroom. She hit the gavel. One time, the sharp times, crack times echoed through the room. It was done. For a moment, I just sat there. I let out a breath that I felt like I had been holding for a month. A breath that came out as a shaky, quiet sob. And then, the spell was broken. The gallery, which had been tomb silent, erupted. Eleanor. Oh, Eleanor. It was Ms. Hattie. She pushed past the little wooden barrier, her face wet with tears. And she grabbed me. She hugged me so tight, I thought my ribs would crack. We didn't know, she cried, her voice muffled in my shoulder. Lord, forgive me. Eleanor, we didn't know. That child. That times, woman asterisk. She lied to us. She told us you were sick, that you weren't yourself. We were just so times worried asterisk. Then the others came, crowding around. The Sisters of Grace, the deacons, my friends. They were all crying, hugging me, touching my arm, patting my back. We're so sorry. Ms. Vance, God bless you. We should have known better than to doubt you. My community, my friends, Tasha had tried to steal them from me, to isolate me and leave me all alone. And in one afternoon of truth, they had all come flooding back. A wave of love and support that washed away the coldness of the trial. I just nodded, patting their hands. The tears finally. Asterisk. Finally times coming to my own eyes. Tears not of sorrow, but of release. Through the blur of my own tears, I saw them. Tasha, her face a mask of pure, ugly, unfiltered hatred, grabbed Marcus's arm with a grip like a talon. Get times up asterisk. She spat at him, her voice a low, venomous hiss. Get up, you idiot. You useless fool. She pulled him, stumbling, through the crowd. She shoved past Ms. Hattie, pushing aside a deacon who tried to speak to her. She was poisoned to the very end, lashing out at everyone as she fled the scene of her humiliation. Just before he passed through the courtroom doors, Marcus stopped. He pulled his arm from her grasp for just 1 second. He looked back at me, his eyes pleading over the heads of our friends. His face was a wreck of shame, fear, and a desperate, childish plea. Asterisk mama, help me. Say something. Fix this. I looked at my son, my only child, the boy I had nursed through fevers, the man who had sat in that witness chair and lied to have me declared incompetent. I looked at him, and I held his gaze, and I slowly, deliberately, shook my head. Just once. It was not a gesture of anger. It was not a gesture of spite. It was a gesture of finality. The door was closed. The bank of Mom was closed. The heart that had always forgiven him. It was closed. 2. Asterisk. There is no help for you here. You made your choice. His face crumbled. He knew. He finally, truly, knew. The last door had closed. He turned, and like a man truly lost, he followed Tasha out into the hallway. Pastor Henderson put one hand on my shoulder. Imani, her own eyes shining, took my arm. Let's go home. Auntie Eleanor, she said softly. They walked with me, flanking me. A guard of honor. We pushed open the heavy brass doors of the courthouse. The bright, warm Atlanta sunshine hit my face. And it was so bright, it was almost blinding. I stood on those courthouse steps, surrounded by my friends, and I took my first deep, clean breath in months. I had walked in as an old woman on trial. I was walking out as Eleanor Vance, the wife of James, and the matriarch of my family. I didn't need a ride. My house was only a few blocks away. I wanted to walk. When I got to my front porch, I turned and hugged Imani. And I hugged my pastor. I walked to my door. My key door. I put my key in the lock, and for the first time since James died, I turned it, stepped inside, and felt not just safety, but absolute, profound peace. We cannot choose the family we are born into, but we can, by the grace of God and a good lawyer, choose what legacy we leave behind. It was 6 months after the trial. The Georgia sun was streaming into my living room, the same living room where Tasha had demanded my money and where I had sat in fear. But today, the room was noisy again. And it was a different kind of noise. It wasn't the sharp, grating sound of Tasha's demanding voice or the shuffling, guilty feet of my son. It was the sound of progress. It was the sound of life. The room was filled with laughter and earnest discussion. Pastor Henderson was at the head of my dining table, a stack of papers in front of him. Ms. Hattie was beside him, a plate of my homemade lemon cookies in her hand, and at my right hand, shuffling her own set of papers, sat Imani. We were holding the first official board meeting of the James Vance Community Scholarship Fund. After the trial, after the dust had settled, I had looked at my husband's will, at that legacy foresight clause, and I had understood. The money that James had times threatened times to give to the church. Well, after I won, I decided to do it anyway. Not all of it. No, a woman must keep her own house in order, but à significant portion. With Imani's help, I had restructured everything. My will, my assets, my trust, my legacy would no longer be a burden, a pot of gold waiting to be stolen by a weak son or a greedy daughter-in-law. It would be what James always intended it to be, a blessing, a wellspring of hope for a community that had given us so much. Of course, the news of what happened in that courtroom had spread through Atlanta's black community faster than a summer thunderstorm. Tasha and Marcus were ruined, not by me, but by their own hands. Pastor Henderson had told me, very gently, what he'd heard through the grapevine. They were drowning in debt. The legal fees the judge had ordered them to pay had wiped them out. They'd had to sell the luxury car. They'd been evicted from their high-rise apartment. The last he heard, Tasha had filed for divorce from Marcus. Her final words to him, overheard by the movers, being that he was a weak, spineless fool who cost her millions. They were living separately, in small, rented apartments somewhere on the other side of town, undone by the very greed that had driven them. Marcus, my son, he had tried to call. It was about a month after the trial. I was in my kitchen, the little camera on the wall. Now, a silent friend. When the phone rang, I had looked at the caller ID, and his name flashed on the small screen, Marcus. My hand hovered over the receiver. I saw his face in the courtroom. That last, desperate, pleading look. Asterisk, Mama, help me. Asterisk, Then I saw his face on the witness stand. Asterisk. No. Sire. She's confused. I stood there for a long time, my hand over the receiver. And I prayed. I prayed for his soul. I prayed for him to find a strength he had never possessed. I prayed for him to find his own way. But I did not answer the phone. Some doors, once you close and bolt them, must stay closed. Forgiveness is between him and God. My peace was between me and myself. Item 4. Imani said, her voice bright and clear, pulling me from my thoughts. A new proposal. She looked up from her notes and smiled, her eyes shining with the passion that so reminded me of her grandmother. I propose the fund's first community initiative, a free legal clinic for our seniors. Ms. Hetty set her cookie down. Oh, child, what a wonderful idea. We'll hold it in the church basement every first Sunday. Imani continued, gaining steam. We can help others navigate wills, trusts, and how to protect themselves from financial exploitation. We'll call it the Vance Legacy Protection Clinic. Pastor Henderson nodded, his eyes shining. I second that motion. A beautiful way to turn your trial into a triumph for others. Eleanor. They all looked at me. The new chairperson of the board. I looked around the room, at these faces. My pastor. My dear friend Hattie. This brilliant, strong young woman who had become the granddaughter of my heart. Asterisk. This times was family. This was the legacy James had truly wanted. He hadn't just left me money to be hoarded. He'd left me a mission to be fulfilled. He hadn't just left me a house. He'd left me a home base. I would be honored, I said, my voice thick with an emotion I hadn't felt in years. And I will lead that clinic myself. My house was, once again, a blessed house. I remembered what I'd thought in the very beginning, all those months ago, that a house filled with family was a blessing. I had been wrong. A house filled with times love asterisk. A house filled with times, purpose asterisk. Asterisk that times was a blessed house. And for the first time in so long, my house and my heart were finally, blessedly, filled with peace. What happened in that courtroom, and in the months that followed, was more than just a legal victory. It was a resurrection. It was the resurrection of my own spirit. I learned that true legacy isn't just what you leave times for, times your family. It's the strength and wisdom you leave. Times inside, times them. And sometimes, in His infinite wisdom, you find that the family God chooses for you, the community that stands by you, the friends that fight for you, is stronger and more true than the family of your own blood. The hardest lesson, the one that cost me my son, was that no is not a curse word. No is a sacred boundary. It is the shield God gives you to protect your dignity, your legacy, and your peace. Sometimes, setting that boundary is the purest form of love. Love for yourself, and love for the life God has given you. I thank you for walking this road with me today. I truly want to know, what are your thoughts on my story? What would you have done in my place, if you feel moved? Please rate this story on a scale of 0 to 10, and I would be so blessed to know how far my story has traveled. Please tell me, what city or what state are you listening from? Thank you for your time, and may God bless you and give you the courage to always protect your peace.